Good evening and welcome to the Drive at 5 on IntellectualRadio.com/iHeartRadio station. I'm your host, Roman, and we have a terrific show planned for you today. First, the forecast from our IntellectualRadio.com Weather Center. Today, cloudy with a chance of showers, maybe a thunder boomer here or there. High close to 60 degrees. Tonight, temperatures rise, cloudy with showers after midnight. Low 50, mainly cloudy with a chance of rain showers, a high of 65 degrees. Tomorrow night, a chance of showers and a possibility of a thunder boomer here or there, low of 54 degrees. The rest of the week forecast looks like this. Rain on Wednesday, high 61 degrees. Thursday, light rain again with a chance of thunderstorms, high close to 60 degrees. And on Friday, partly cloudy, high mid-50s. The Drive at 5 is part of the Monday Night Mogul with One Sister to Another with Angela Johnson at 4 p.m. Straight No Chaser with Rhea Ray Harris at 6 p.m. Setting it off with John Stennis at 7 p.m. Maze Says with Maze Jackson at 8 p.m. And Keeping It Real Estate with Harold Arnold at 3 p.m. The Drive at 5 is also part of the fabulous 5 at 5 on IntellectualRadio.com. Today, my guest is the Illinois Press Secretary for Madam Secretary Hillary Rodham Clinton. Please give a Drive at 5 welcome on the intellectual line to Delmarie Cobb. Welcome to the Drive.
Hi, thank you very much.
Please give IntellectualRadio.com/iHeartRadio station your background.
Well, I am a political consultant. I've been working in politics now since 1988 when I did Jesse Jackson's campaign when he ran for president. I was his national traveling press secretary at that time, and then I became the first African-American press secretary for the Democratic National Convention when it was here in Chicago in 1996, and I was state director for Bill Bradley when he ran for president in 2000, and now I'm working for Hillary Clinton. I'm her Illinois press secretary. And before that, before I got into politics, I was a TV reporter for 10 years.
Oh, what station?
I did the gypsy thing, so there was not one station in the country.
Okay, why the media and the FBI is so focused on Madam Secretary Hillary Rodham Clinton emails? It is known that Republican Secretary of State like Colin Powell and Condoleezza Rice did the same thing. What is so special about her emails that's grabbing everyone's attention?
Well, I think what happens is when you're running for office, everything changes. The rules sort of go out the window, and there's another level of scrutiny that takes place that doesn't take place when you're just an appointee to a position. Even though it's a high position and a very trusted position, there still is not the same scrutiny. I mean, we see that all the time. When people are just civilians, they can do something, but the moment they decide to run for public office, those same actions suddenly are magnified.
Well, in all fairness, this was an issue even when she didn't announce it was that she was president. So,
well, but Hillary Clinton is a special case. I mean, you know, she has been under the spotlight for a very, very long time. So there's a different set of rules when it comes to Hillary Clinton.
Black issues are now in the forefront in the presidential campaign. The issue in last night's debate was massive incarceration under her husband, former President Bill Clinton. A lot of people are saying this bill is giving police officers the green light to lock up African Americans. Given what's going on in Chicago with a 65 to 70% of African Americans being incarcerated in Cook County Jail, what policies, if any, as Madam President, would implement to help curb this problem?
Well, she has acknowledged, as well as the former president has acknowledged, her husband, that there were unintended consequences in the bill. And remember, when the crime bill was passed, it had the support of almost all of the Congressional Black Caucus. So it was not passed in a vacuum. Many African Americans supported it. What happened was a lot of the states had policies that were added on to it, and it made the unintended consequences were that African American men in particular were incarcerated at a higher rate. See, she certainly has acknowledged that and has promised to work on reforming the criminal justice system to make sure that these policies don't do unfair to the African American community. Also, remember that she was not in Congress when that bill was passed, and actually Bernie Sanders, Senator Bernie Sanders, who is running against her, he voted for the bill. So while many people are accusing her of supporting the bill, she did not vote for the bill, and Senator Bernie Sanders did vote for them. The president, Clinton, he has apologized for the unintended, and Bernie Sanders still hasn't apologized for it.
What is the unintended consequences? You mentioned that a lot. What is the
high level of incarceration that we've seen as a result of the disparity between crack and powder cocaine, and also when it comes to 3 strikes and you're out, which was the zero tolerance. Those are the unintended consequences. It was about making people safe, but what has happened is, as we know, as far as law enforcement in our country, it has a different effect when it comes to African Americans. There's a different standard applied to African Americans. And so when you talk about just the powder cocaine versus crack cocaine, white people who are caught with powder cocaine get probation. African Americans who are caught with crack cocaine wind up, in many cases, going to jail.
And you said the Black Caucus overwhelmingly supported this bill.
I think it was only 10 Congressional Black Caucus members who did not support the bill.
Black Lives Matter has been in the presidential campaign during this election cycle due to police brutality and the neglect of Black issues. Black jobs matter as well. Why Blacks are not receiving their fair share of job opportunities? And Madam President Hillary Clinton, I'm sorry, let me reverse that, speaking. Secretary of State former Secretary of State Hillary Rodham Clinton addressed some of these issues, but what are the specifics to help African Americans to receive job opportunities? They're saying they're not receiving their fair share of job opportunities. Why?
And she's acknowledged that as well, that because there are not being jobs created in the African American community, and that's why she announced a $125 billion program that would go specifically to creating jobs by building our nation's infrastructure. Our nation's infrastructure is crumbling. At one time, we were number 1. Now I think we're 16th in the world in terms of crumbling infrastructure. And so if you just rebuilt our infrastructure throughout the country, when you talk about transportation and streets and bridges, and what happened in Flint, our water system, if you just rebuilt that, that would create thousands and thousands of jobs in our community, as well as part of her program is to put $25 billion to historically Black colleges to make sure that they're kept open and that they can receive students who can then get scholarships and go to school at an affordable rate without graduating with high debt. So those are some of the things that she has acknowledged that need to be done. and in communities that have been left behind. And she talks about communities that have been left behind, and we know that for sure that has happened all over the country.
You mentioned Flint, Michigan. During the debate last night, Madam Secretary is calling for Flint, Michigan Governor Rick Snyder to resign or be recalled. However, African Americans feel if this was a white issue, all hell would break loose with HIV, AIDS, drug addiction, mental health, and education. That if that affected whites, it would have been an alarming rate. But Black politicians show some concerns about our issues during this election. What is the difference in Madam Secretary's case about these issues? Because she said over and over, if this was a white community, things would be different. Can you define that meaning?
Yes, I think the fact that she's acknowledged that white privilege, and she's talked about white privilege and how, as a white person, white people often don't understand that they are being given preferential treatment just by the fact that they are the privilege that they have simply because the system is set up that there are racial biases that are systemic. And so people don't have to be racist to have racial biases. I mean, I think many times that what we are experiencing as African Americans are not because people are malicious, it's just that people are unaware. I mean, we saw something similar happen just here in Chicago recently when the young kids in Barrington had the kids from Kenwood at their school. They were all at an event, and the kids in Barrington put on a skit where they had a slave auction. Now, they won. The skit won. So that tells you, without us even knowing, that the people who were judging the skit in all likelihood were not African American. Whereas the kids and the parents from Kenwood were appalled at the fact that these kids put on a skit. That shows you the level of insensitivity, that people want to think that everything is equal and that it's not being done maliciously, but the effects are still the same nevertheless. And that is what Hillary Clinton is acknowledging, that there are systems in place, there are barriers in place that hold African Americans back. And that's what she's talking about when she says we have to break down these barriers. And so she is acknowledging that if the same things were happening in white communities, there would be a national uproar. But when they happen in African American communities, there tends to be the attitude that, oh, well, that's just them. Or, oh, well, that's just poor people. And so the same attention isn't given it. As we hear about Flint, we're told that the people who are black and poor, white, told the government. They went down to their local government with bottles of water that were brown. And they're saying something is wrong. My kids are getting sick. They've got rashes. Something's wrong. And they were ignored. They were told, oh, no, it'll be okay. Just run your water. There's nothing wrong. All the while they knew that, in fact, they had switched the water system, and it was coming from a different source, and that source was tainting their water.
They're saying that a lot of things can be done. They have a recall system, and the questions I've been receiving is why the Black Caucus there not recalling the governor, the mayor, same thing, and any organization that's out there that's not for profit, why they're not recalling the governor?
Well, one of the things Hillary Clinton is saying is that she's asking for more than just recalling the governor. She was one of the first ones to sound the alarm nationally about the problem in Flint. She was one of the first ones to go visit Flint and talk to the mayor. And what she has said as a result of that is she's asking for the government to give Flint the money to take out the pipes and put new pipes in there. Because short of that, we can recall the governor, we can get rid of the governor, we can do all of that. But that is not going to help these kids right now. And what she's saying, or the people who live in Flint, and what she's saying is we've got to tear up that whole system and replace it. And the only way we can do that is the federal government is going to have to give money to Flint in order to make that happen.
Another issue that raises some concerns in the Black community is a growing number of African-American males are being wrongly accused of rape, assault, harassment, stalking, and now children that doesn't belong to them. And because of DNA testing, it is costing, and I'm mentioning the state of Illinois, hundreds of millions of dollars to settle cases. And it's also messing up young Black men's lives. What policy or law, if any, can be created if Madam Secretary Hillary Rodham Clinton is in office? Should there be any consequences?
Well, that's part of her criminal justice reform. And again, remember that when the Laquan McDonald video was released, she was one of the first people to call for a Justice Department investigation. So that's part of what she is talking about, as well as the fact that we have to end, the era of mass incarceration. We have to end racial profiling, which she helped to sponsor a bill when she was in the Senate to end calling for an end to racial profiling. She also is calling for all police departments in the nation to have access to body cameras so that everybody, whether you're the police officer or the citizen, can then have proof of what took place when you were stopped or that transaction took place. So those are some of the things that she is calling for, as well as where there's practices in cities like Chicago, where there's been a number of police misconduct cases where there should be investigations, because something is absolutely wrong if it happens over and over again.
Chicago State and Governor State are in jeopardy of closing its doors. Bernie Sanders has addressed this issue. However, Madam Secretary did not address this issue at all, according to some sources. These institutions mainly affect African Americans in both higher education institutions. Why Hillary Rodham Clinton? I know Bill Clinton is coming to Chicago tomorrow. Why they haven't addressed these issues that's concerning? They're talking about education. You mentioned higher education.
Well, that's not true. Hillary Clinton was at the Parkway Ballroom on February 17th, and in her speech, she talked about Chicago State University specifically. She talked about the budget impasse. She talked about the fact that the governor was giving his budget address that very day that she was in Chicago, and she talked about it must be a speech based on fiction, given that how could he give a budget address when we haven't passed a budget? So no, that's not true. She was one of the very first people to talk about it. And you can go to any newspaper articles because they were all the media were there covering it, and go back to February 17th and see her quotes about what was happening at Chicago State University then. Even more has happened since then, and the fact that she was talking about the MAP grants and how important the MAP grants were to young students and adult students who needed help with their college tuition.
So you're saying that the Bernie Sanders campaign that's originally said they've been going out there protesting, you're saying she was the first one that brought it to light?
Well, what I'm saying is, you said she hadn't that they're saying she hasn't said anything about it. And I'm saying on record, when she was here, February 17th,
Okay.
it was in her speech. And I'm sure you can go to any newspaper online and find where she talked about it and talked about the governor and talked about the budget impasse and talked about the need for math grants.
Okay. Special education is also concerning the African American community, has been the educational system. Some students are left behind because special education has been cut. In Madam Secretary's education plan, would there be any funding resources allocated towards special education?
Well, this is the issue that is near and dear to her heart, and she has talked about it for years. I mean, that's what she wrote the book in 1996, It Takes a Village. And those are all the issues. Early childhood education, that's some of the things that she talked about then. But you can go back as far as when she got out of college and started working for the Children's Defense Fund. She has worked on many issues affecting education. I mean, one of the things she worked on, one of her first assignments with Children's Defense Fund was going to South Carolina. And at that time, in South Carolina, juveniles were being put in jail cells with adult offenders. And so as a result of that, those juveniles were being molested and assaulted. It took 3 years to change those policies, but she worked on that and changed those policies. Another thing she did is after that, she went to Alabama and she went undercover and posed as a parent because what was happening is Alabama had private schools that were getting federal funds, and they were segregated and they were biased and they were keeping African American students out. So she posed as a white parent who was interested in putting her child in one of those schools to see if, in fact, they would say to her when she asked about black students coming there, what would they say to her? And she was able to uncover that because, of course, thinking they're talking to any other white parent, they didn't allow black students in the schools. She did was, of course, the Children's Health Insurance Plan. That was one of her plans that she fought for and instituted, and as a result, 8 million children are insured because of that. So when it comes to children and education and fairness and opportunity and policies that are unfair to African Americans and young people, she has been on the forefront of that. And many of the things that she has done, people don't even realize she was a part of it.
You are listening to IntellectualRadio.com/iHeart radio station. The show is The Drive at 5 on IntellectualRadio.com. On the intellectual line, we have press for Clinton, Delmarie Cobb. And you mentioned something that was key. A lot of critics are scratching their heads, trying to understand the fact that why so many African Americans are supporting Hillary Rodham Clinton. Could you explain to the critics why more African Americans are supporting Hillary Rodham Clinton?
Well, I think on the face of that, there's, that question should be analyzed, because to think that African Americans would not know who is a friend and who isn't a friend is to say that there's something lacking in our ability to do research. As I mentioned to you, what she did in South Carolina, well, coincidentally, South Carolina was one of the first primaries that was not, all white. It was the first primary where there was actual diversity. And there's a reason that African Americans in South Carolina overwhelmingly supported her. And that reason goes back to many of them know her. They know her from the days when she got the policy change to ban juveniles from going into being placed into jail cells with adult prisoners. They know her in Arkansas when she was First Lady, and she started, or in fact, before she was First Lady, when she was actually right out of school and right out of the Children's Defense Fund, she started the legal aid clinic in Arkansas. So many of the southern states know her and know her well, and knew her before she was ever known for being the president's wife.
And anything you want to add to say to the people on intellectualradio.com/iHeartRadio station? Voting is March 15. Plead your case. Why should people vote for Hillary Rodham Clinton?
Well, I think the most important thing is that people need to vote, period. And we are hearing that there's still a lot of people who don't realize that there's a primary next Tuesday, and that is shocking. So we need to make sure that people go out and vote during the primary, because the primary is so important, because that's when you select who you elect in November, and you cannot let other people do it for you. You have to do it yourself. And politics is a contact sport, meaning you've got to knock on doors, you've got to make phone calls, you got to call your friends, you got to take them to the polls, and it's not a sit back on your couch and let other people do it for you. And so Hillary Clinton, I think, is going to make history, not only as the first not only as the first woman president, but also she's going to make history in terms of some of her policies that are going to address some of the systemic obstacles that exist when it comes to the advancement of African Americans. And I think we'll see that, because I think there'll be a lot of pressure on her as a woman to do a good job and to get things done. She will not be allowed to just talk about it. She will actually have to get things done, because all eyes will be on her.
What is her punch number?
You know what? I do not know. Unfortunately, I do not know what her punch number is, but Hillary Clinton, you do know that.
Okay, I was trying to give you a plug there. So, but Delmarie, if you have any time to come in the studio and talk politics, we are you here on the Drive at 5. It wasn't that bad, right?
Right, and I was actually, as you know, I was going to come in today, but unfortunately I wasn't able to, because tomorrow President Bill Clinton is coming into town, and that changed my whole day.
Do you want to plug that event very quickly?
Yes, he's coming into town tomorrow morning. He's going to be in Evanston at an event at the Beth Email Synagogue, and I don't have the address to it. I'm not at my desk, unfortunately, but that's where he's going to be, and he's only going to be there for maybe an hour before others, where there's an election taking place on March 15th.
All right. Thank you so much, Delmarie. Thanks for the drive.
And thank you.
All right. When we come back on intellectualradio.com/iHeartRadio station, the Assistant Director of 35 and Up and Local Chapter Director of No More, Sharen Chester, will join us live on the Drive at 5 on intellectualradio.com.